Hi friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is a mermaid special effects video. So I started out using Nye Liquid Latex. This is the skin tone color, but unfortunately for me, I'm not skin toned, I am paper toned. So it dries a little bit darker than I like, but I'm using a spatula and a palette to form that into the shape that I wanted. I wanted this look to kind of seem as though like a mermaid's human suit had ripped on something, so I'm spreading that out to look like raised edges of skin. I then went in with a sponge and used a thinner layer of that liquid latex to blend it into my skin more naturally. But unfortunately the Nye Liquid Latex dries very quickly, and I played around with it a little too much, so it started pulling at the edges. Once that was completely dry, I took a small pair of scissors and slid them just under the edge of the thicker raised part of the latex so that it would come up naturally and I could paint underneath it to give it some depth. You could also and should probably use a toothpick for this, but I had scissors right in my kit, so I figured I'd risk it. Then I took a translucent powder, this one's from e.l.f., and I used that to set the latex and also set just the entire surrounding area of my legs so that it was all one uniform tone. And then I realized that it was way too dark around the latex and way too light around the powder, so I took my foundation color and used a foundation brush from Real Techniques to just brush that over and try to give it a uniform tone. I then took more of that powder and set the foundation color. This also helped to kind of set down the main color in the center of the open skin area so that I could go in with a blue and dust that around to look more like an undertone of a mermaid's tail. Then I took a smaller brush and put that same color blue more deeply around the areas so that it looks like it is kind of a separate skin from my own. Then using a deep purple shade, I deepened that even more and centered it mainly around the left edge of the circle to keep it looking somewhat like a shadow. I then stippled more of a skin tone area back around the skin to kind of even out that white powder area. And then I tried to find a shortcut because this had already taken about half an hour to do, and I placed a fishnet and tried to use that as a stencil for the lighter blue color so that it would naturally make that scale shape. But when I pulled that off, I realized that since it was a powder and not a liquid, it didn't make a deep enough imprint to stand out. I also used green colors and a mixture of darker and lighter blues to give that kind of an iridescent, classic mermaid color. So like I said, the imprint didn't stick. All that was there was kind of a light whitish outline of where the scales had been, so instead I had to go in by hand, taking a deeper blue color and mapping those out myself. I alternated between darker shades of blue and lighter shades of blue to try and give it some variation to scales, since none of them are going to be the same. I also started to alternate between more diamond-shaped scales and the more classically curved edge scales, so that they looked more like they naturally overlapped on one another, and I kept them darker towards the edges and lighter toward the center with the green colors. Then, using a mix of that darker blue color and the purple, I went over each curved edge of the scales and blended that back and forth until it looked like a natural shadow. Believe it or not, I trimmed most of this part out because it took me about an hour to map out each of these scales. I wanted to make sure I had that base color down the way I wanted it before I went in with these little details, because I knew that would kind of give the basis for the whole rest of the look. At this point, it's coming together a lot more how I envisioned it, so I then started focusing on adding highlights and shadows to each of the individual scales. Once I had the scales undertoned the way I wanted it, I mixed a little bit of a setting spray with some shavings of two, I guess you could call them glittery, they're more like duochrome, colors from Colourpop. And then, using that same small brush, I added that little bit of glitter to select scales throughout the design. And then I couldn't resist and I went in with fake blood, like I always do. I focused that mainly on the outer edge because I didn't want to cover up most of the design work that I had laid down. But I also drew that a little bit onto the edge of the actual latex itself. That way it peeked out enough that you could tell it was a division line between the skin and the design on the inside. I actually wish I had stopped myself a little bit before this point because I think the deepness of the blood kind of made the drawing itself look a little more two-dimensional than I wanted, but I can never stop myself with fake blood. And that is the finished design. I had a lot of fun making this video. I even went in with a deep purple eyeliner and outlined the scales and then brushed over it entirely with a different highlighter from Hard Candy to try and give it more of that three-dimensional look in comparison with the fake blood. But I think I liked how it came out before, so I'm not really sure which one was my favorite. But if you like this type of video and would like to see more of them, then like this and subscribe so you'll be notified when I make more. Thanks for watching. Bye.